Hello, Lisa here. Welcome to Walking the Self-Worth Path, a series where I share with you my favorite tarot and witchy tools, techniques, and rituals to support your journey to an empowered life. So today we're going to be talking about my favorite decks and books for accountability. Now at this stage in the self-worth path, things are starting to get a little stickier. This is where we're doing things like shadow work, looking really head on at our relationship with trust and all of that kind of stuff. This is a stage where we really start to take the awareness that we've built during our time using that self-awareness work to get that deeper self-knowledge. Now we take that knowledge of self and we start to apply it to actually shifting the course of things. So the tools I have in this category really are meant to support some of that deepest, hardest work. So I'm going to start out with decks and then we'll dive into books afterwards. So I'm in no particular order. I have some oracle decks and some tarot decks. So you could essentially call these also my favorite decks for shadow work at the moment. But yeah, just things that are going to help sort of hold your hand through the work, the difficult work of facing the parts of yourself that are hidden, the parts of yourself you want to bring out into the light, both good and difficult, and also really looking at patterns and being super courageously honest with yourself. So let's start with one that I think a lot of you who watch my channel regularly will see coming, and that is the beautiful Deviant Moon Tarot. This deck is, I think, one of the most brilliant decks I've ever encountered for doing this kind of work. Not because the art is creepy. Let's just zoom in a bit. Not because the art is creepy, although I will admit that objectively this art is creepy. But I think because a lot of these cards seem to literally exist in the realm of shadow. And keep in mind that shadow isn't always negative, right? A lot of the things that we have buried are neutral things or positive things, even things that have been suppressed that we just haven't wanted to look at. And what I find really interesting about this deck is it feels like the superficial layer of maybe what we expect to see has been peeled away and we can look at things a little more honestly. At least that's my experience working with this deck. There's something really raw and transparent and vulnerable in its authenticity that this deck brings. And I think one of the things that, for some reason, just the way that Patrick Valenza has illustrated these cards, I find that it's just easier for me to spot the things that I might not spot looking at, say, a Rider-Waite-Smith clone deck or something with gentler artwork. I just feel like it lets me be honest with myself. And I think because this deck is so atmospheric too, there could just be an element of being drawn into this darker, shadowier world and helping me to stay, I guess, focused with the work that I'm trying to do with this deck, which when I'm doing shadow work or accountability work, I want a deck that isn't going to tell me what I want to hear, right? I want a deck that the messages are going to come through and be like, no, you need to look at this. Like, look at the moon with this puppet string element. The Knight of Wands, who's riding what looks like a cockroachy kind of creature. I'm not saying that this deck is for everyone. And to date, at the moment I'm filming this, I've only ever been called to pull this deck for a client reading one time. And it ended up being exactly what that client needed in that moment. But typically, this is a deck that I use mostly for myself when I need those harder hitting messages. But if you want a deck, I think that's going to invite you to explore a little bit less of the gentle messages, then I think this is a great deck for that. I just think there's a lot of truth telling in these cards. So this is always one of my favorites. Again, you do not need any particular kind of deck to do this work. I'm just sharing some of my favorites, the ones that I enjoy reaching for, because I love tarot and I love the way that different artwork evokes a different feeling in me or helps me to focus on different things. But you don't need any particular special kind of deck to do this work. And in fact, you don't even need a deck to do this work. But if you like these tools and you find that they help and support you in your practice, then more power to you, in my opinion. I mean, like, we could all use a little help. So this deck, I'm just going to keep us zoomed in. This is the Oracle of Echoes by Anna Turian. And it feels when I hold it, this deck always feels so insubstantial. It just feels like it doesn't have as many cards as most of my other Oracle cards. But there's something about this art that just, it feels like it connects me with that deeper layer. And the cards that have been chosen to make up this deck are very balanced. There are positive messages, neutral messages, and difficult messages in these cards, but all of them see all of the images and all of the keywords. They seem to invoke in me a desire to dive deep, just like the Deviant Moon Tarot does. Like here with Awaken Inner Force, you could look at this in like, where am I giving away my power? Where do I need to tap back into my inner courage and my inner strength? Discord obviously has some shadowy elements. Protection, where am I like missing this piece? Where are the shadows around feeling protected or feeling safe or not feeling safe? Lovers obviously has a lot of interesting things in this artwork about how we're bonded to others and how maybe we're too bonded, or looking at codependency could be an issue there. Where do we need to back off, right? Where are we really torn and frozen with immobility because we can't make a decision? There are so, look at this inner strength card. I mean, come on. There's so many really good things here, like warning, loss, letting go, self-involved. Like, talk about shadow work, right? This deck has a lot of deceit. This deck will call you out for sure, and a lot of the messages here are very hard-hitting. Self-sabotage, again, a wonderful concept when we're thinking about really being honest with ourselves, pulling that and reflecting on that. Sorrow. This deck invites connection with truth and connection with your inner emotional realm, which is incredibly helpful when you're doing the difficult work of holding yourself accountable to the lifestyle that you want to live, lifestyle that you want to live, and recognizing that you may need to make changes to be in a place that you really want to be in your life. And this deck is very supportive in that way. As far as I know, everything I'm sharing with you today is still currently available, at least at the time that I'm filming this. Oracle of Echoes constantly comes back into print again and again and again. Anna usually makes it available through her website, but I will have links to everything in the description box down below. So that was an Oracle deck. Let's talk about another tarot deck. So here I have another really good hard-hitting deck, and this is the absolutely delightful Goliath Tarot. So the Goliath is another deck that I think really thrives in that darker, shadowier realm. The intensity of the artwork, I think especially, makes this a really excellent deck for asking yourself hard questions and digging down a little bit deeper. The artwork here is very bold. And when I say that, what I mean is that a lot of these cards, they kind of smack you upside the head. Now, keep in mind, not everybody is going to want to, and I have a couple of decks coming up that are much gentler, because I think it's a bit of a misconception that shadow work decks or accountability decks need to like smack you upside the face. I personally find that really, really helpful, because one of my personal hangups is I have a tendency to put a positive spin on everything to my own detriment, right? So whether it's my own self that I need to look at or other situations in my life, sometimes I have a tendency to only want to see the good. And so I find that decks that really are confronting and hard-hitting and difficult help me to look at things more honestly and really examine truth, again, as I'm saying. So these kinds of decks, these first three in general, are the ones I'm quickest to reach for shadow work or accountability, because I just find that they work best for me and my tendencies. But you might be somebody who needs a helping hand, needs a gentler deck to support you in doing the difficult work of shadow work and accountability. It's kind of like we talk about how a lot of us are doing this kind of difficult, deep work in the fall and the winter time. But for other people, they might actually do much better trying to do accountability and shadow work in the spring and summer when things are a little brighter and they feel maybe less isolated. Everybody is different, and I think that's part of the work of the prior step, where we're working in self-awareness and we're getting to know ourselves, is knowing how to best meet ourselves where we are. But the Goliath, I find all of these cards just seem to they look at you in the eyes, right? There's nothing timid about this deck, and its boldness and its ferocity just help me to connect again with that deeper work that I find personally helpful in my own journey walking the self-worth path. So the Goliath Tarot, I believe this is currently still available. As I said, I will have a link to it down below. This one is absolutely beautiful. This is the second edition, and it came with matte cards, slightly smaller than the first edition, and just a couple of other changes that just made it really easy to work with, and I absolutely love this deck. So let's talk about a couple more supportive, I would say gentler decks for shadow work. the first of these that I want to mention is, and this is such a beautiful one for any kind of healing work, but the Ember and Aura Tarot by Jamie Richardson is just, oh, if you want something that's going to help you tap in to self-compassion, to gentleness, this deck, man, this one really, really works. Now I have reversals currently shuffled in, and hi, pink edging. I have reversals currently shuffled into mine. Now this one is the Awakening edition, 2019 edition. I don't know if there's been any changes since I got my copy. This deck, I find, is one of those decks that sort of takes you by the hand. You'll notice there's a bit of a common theme in this deck and the Oracle of Echoes, in that both this one and Oracle of Echoes both feel very watery and very soft, even though I feel like both can be helpful for discerning truth. The color palette of this deck and the way that the figures are depicted in the scenes and the way that the cards are illustrated, to me, is a little bit less jarring than some of the other decks I might personally tend to reach for to do this work. So if you're looking for something that's going to be a little softer, a little more gentle, there's also a really beautiful, kind of hard to describe spiritual overtone to this deck, where it just feels like it invites you very gently to listen to the voice of spirit, to listen to deep wisdom, to tune in to what you already know to be true, to trust yourself. And I feel like that's something that this deck really invites, that not a lot of other decks in my collection really do. And I love this Sage of Coins. It's like Apothecary. Oh, so good. Just absolutely a stunning, stunning deck. And again, very soft, very inviting. I love this Hermit. I love seeing like crone energy in the Hermit card. It makes me really happy. But yeah, I love this, and it's really, really beautiful. Again, very watery, very gentle, and very unobtrusive in the sense that it doesn't sort of like poke at you. It just seems to open a door or a window to new understanding about yourself, and I love that about this deck. So yes, this is the Ember and Aura Tarot, and that is what the backings look like. Really, really, really beautiful. So lastly, I have one more deck, and this last one is an Oracle deck. Now, I believe I have walkthroughs of most of these decks on my channel, so I will try to remember to link some of them in the cards if I have a walkthrough. But this last deck, I know I have a walkthrough, and this is such a gorgeous deck. This is the Mystical Healing Reading Cards by Ina Segal. Now, I did previously have another deck by Ina Segal that I loved for shadow work, but I didn't love the artwork. Like, can we talk about how gorgeous this is? So when this deck came out and it had a very similar feeling to it, I was like, this is mine. This is my Ina Segal deck. And I think that's actually an interesting point. Sometimes we think that if we like one deck by a creator, we will therefore like them all. Not my experience at all. But I find that Ina Segal's work, and specifically the guidebook that comes along with this deck, which if I had time, I would show you the whole thing because it's incredible, gives you journal prompts, calls to action, suggests things you can do tangibly to support the work that comes up when you pull these cards. But the messages and the themes of this particular set of cards, like, look, examine your integrity, experience rebirth. This deck seems designed for this kind of work. Contemplate death and beyond. Ground yourself. Step into the unknown. I feel like this deck invites specifically that kind of work that comes up when we're doing accountability work. Transform anger. Like, hi. Relinquish control. This was actually one of the cards that just like, I was like, yes, like this deck is definitely inviting truth, exploration of truth within oneself. Unlock your heart. Oh, so good. Stop breaking agreements. Take positive action. It's a no. Access clear thinking. Develop strong concentration. Awaken your vulnerability. This deck, in my opinion, as an Oracle deck, is one of my favorites for supporting this specific kind of work. Reverse disassociation. I mean, there's some powerful stuff in here. Release fear, recognize divine timing, create boundaries. And it goes beyond the artwork, which I think is stunning. And the messages here, break addiction. And it goes deeper because when you get into the guidebook, in my experience with it, it really invites reflection and also it gives you tangible suggestions of things you can do right away to make progress in that particular area. And I think that's incredibly special. I don't think there's a lot like minimize guilt. Come on, become more objective. So yes, this deck, in my opinion, temper your criticism. This is so great for specifically for accountability work. And as a mass market deck, this is such a treasure. The fact that it is affordable, that it's easy to find. For most of us, I would say we can get a hold of this deck pretty easily. You can ask your local bookseller to bring it in. It's affordable. It has so much wonderful healing work in it, and I can't recommend this one highly enough. And I didn't really know what I was going to think of it, but it is stunning, and I'm so grateful that I have it. So I would say those are 5 of the decks that I would immediately recommend if you're doing the work of accountability and shadow work and you want to know where to start. These, excellent. So let's talk about books. If I had to recommend one book to help you level up your accountability game, Brené Brown's work, The Gifts of Imperfection, absolutely worth a read. If you've never read this book and you consider yourself somebody who is a sensitive person, an empath, somebody who struggles with being too hard on yourself, anything along those lines, this book will help you to understand what compassionate accountability looks like. Brené Brown is excellent at tapping into what makes us vulnerable and how we can hold ourselves accountable without being jerks to ourselves. She does such a wonderful job. And she's got 3 books, I believe, that are all in this same realm. But The Gifts of Imperfection was one of the first that I ever read. I think the first I ever read by Brené Brown, and it is just absolutely fantastic. So she talks about courage, compassion, and connection, exploring the power of love, things that get in the way, cultivating authenticity, self-compassion, a resilient spirit, gratitude and joy, intention and trusting faith, creativity, play and rest, calm and stillness, meaningful work, laughter, song, and dance, and talks about letting go of being cool and always in control. Brené Brown has been a huge inspiration to me, and I absolutely love what she shares in her books. But if you were going to start with a Brené Brown book, definitely start with The Gifts of Imperfection. She also has a glorious talk that you can find on YouTube. I'll try to remember to link it down below on vulnerability. She did a really powerful TED Talk, and it's incredible. So definitely recommend that. Now this book, okay, I'm going to zoom us back out a little because it's bigger. All right. So this book is one that I struggled a bit with. But I love the concept, and I think that if you resonate with Denise Linn's writing style, if you have her oracle decks, you appreciate the way that she comes at things, you might really genuinely enjoy this. And the concept of this book is really good for doing difficult work. She speaks about, so energy strands, the ultimate guide to clearing the cords that are constricting your life. The basic premise of this book is that we have cords, and I talk about something kind of similar in the SelfWorth Path, where I talk about the ways that your life experiences have created connections to your present and untangling all of that. We talked about that in self-awareness. What Denise Linn is talking about is cords and strands that connect you to other people, to things that you desire or have, or memories you have, experiences you have. And she goes into it in a really interesting way and looks at like how you can look at all these like things that are stuck to you, all these different strands, and you can actually clear the ones that are no longer needed in your life. It's a really interesting concept. Some of the writing in here kind of made me giggle in a way where I don't think she was trying to necessarily be funny, or maybe she was. I'm not entirely sure. But in general, let's just take a look at the contents, because that is what I like to do with these. Understanding energy strands, exploring your strands, cutting the ties that bind, so releasing the strands that diminish you, protecting and shielding your energy field, and strengthening the strands that empower you. And I think that gives you a really good idea of what this book is about. I actually got this book during a Hay House sale. I believe it was. Yeah, it's a Hay House book. I got this during a Hay House sale, and it was definitely worth the read. Not my very, very favorite book in terms of writing style, but the content of the book is good. And I think it brings that idea of how our experiences, past relationships, current relationships, how they can bond to us and weigh us down or lift us up depending. And asks you to kind of take an honest look at those connections. And let's face it, that is a huge part of accountability, is recognizing those connections and whether they're serving you or not and how to handle that. So it is really, really interesting. Not my very favorite ever, but had really good information. So it's worth checking out, particularly if you can see it on sale. Definitely recommend. Or if you already know you love Denise Linn and her writing style, scoop it up for sure, because I think that she's exploring a really helpful concept in this book. Let's put it over here. So next up, I haven't actually had reason to use this yet, but I'm so glad that I have it. And I found this on Amazon. It may even be independently published. Yeah, this is an independently published book, a John T. production, it says, but it's called Rage Page. Now, do you need this? No. Does it make me feel really good to have it handy just in case I ever need it? Yeah, it does. It's basically just a guided journal for when you're having a really tough day. So it says Rage Page, a journal for the bad days, a journal that allows you to vent but always ends with a happy thought. And it's just really... like, the concept of this journal is so great. You just flip to any page. Like, you could probably work through it in order since they're all pretty similar. They're just a little bit different. But each page or set of pages in here, and don't mind all of the swearing, you just fill in the day, and then you just answer these prompts. Like, you describe what the situation was of the day that was causing you trouble. These things make me want to punch my pillow. A word of the day where you can write an expletive or whatever you want. More stuff. What can I do to make tomorrow better, basically, and some gratitude here and a happy thought of the day. So it's the idea is that you can just really be, I think the fact that there's so much swearing in here just like opens the gateway to being able to purge if you're just mad about something and you just need to get it out of your head. So again, I love having this. I keep it in a little pile of other little journals that I have handy. And if I ever need this, if I'm ever really frustrated or angry, I know I could grab this and write my way through it. And it just makes me feel better knowing that I could. Again, do you need this? No. All you need to do is pull out any journal if you want to purge that way and journal. But I just thought this was really fun, so I thought I would share it with you guys. I'm assuming because it's self-published, I'm hoping it's still available. And as long as it's still available, I will definitely have a link to it down below. I just thought it was really fun, and I think it was really inexpensive. I can't remember the price off the top of my head, but it was very affordable, and I think it's just a fun thing to throw in a self-care toolkit or just to have handy. So definitely thought that was a lot of fun. Now, this one is definitely my number one recommendation, other than my own book, because, hi, I wrote that one. But this one I didn't write, and it's incredible. Now, if you have even a passing curiosity interest in the chakras, and you're also doing self-worth work, this is like the book for you. Anna Judith is the author of quite a few books on the chakras, and in my opinion is like the foremost expert, I suppose, in working with the chakras as a way to work on personal healing and personal growth. I have her book, Eastern Body, Western Mind, which is actually referenced here on the cover. And that book is very in-depth and really, really good. This book is incredibly accessible. It's easy to read, and it gives you real tangible techniques for exploring what she calls charge. So the book, The Charge in the Energy Body, the basic premise to this book is that everything that we experience in life has some charge to it. Anger is a charge. Happiness is a charge. And this book teaches you how to manage that charge and what it looks like and how different ways you engage with charge affect the way that you handle yourself in your relationships. And when it comes to accountability and shadow work and really looking at how you respond to situations that come up in your life and like how you navigate difficult stuff, this is an excellent, excellent analogy for that work. So it does go through all of the chakras as a way to look at charge. So, but this book, I've read it cover to cover. It's very, very, very good. So the contents, the basics about charge. Charge is the key to your life force. Talks about mind and body, energy as the prime connector. Talks about common things that charge and common things that discharge you. So things that fill you with that charge, things that like deplete you of charge. And talks about things you can do that can either charge you or discharge you if you need to create more balance. Talks about riding the wave. There's a brilliant chapter on comfort zone, which is worth the entire book by itself. And by the way, this was also picked up for me. I picked this up during a Hay House sale also. Talks about binding charge, so how we've created blocks. And this is a great thing to explore if you know you have had a tendency in your life to bottle your feelings or your emotions and how you can kind of face and deal with that. Bringing in or healing with charge, begin in awareness, self-regulation, charge and trauma. This was a brilliant section as well. And then we get into charge and the chakras. And then from there, there's a little bit more about what the chakra system is all about, and then takes you through a chapter for each of the 7 chakras, which is incredible, and then takes that and builds upon it for the second half of the second 2/3 of the book, I guess. Charge in relationships, charge in societies. There's stuff here about character structures and patterns, and it's, oh my gosh. If you're even remotely, again, if you're interested in chakras, this is worth a read. If you're interested in looking at personal patterns in yourself and your relationships, and especially, I think this book is brilliant at looking at interpersonal relationships, romantic, platonic, doesn't matter, but how you handle like life situations that come up. And if you really want to learn healthy techniques for being responsible for yourself, I just think this book gives you just a ton of information. And you can see here, I have dog-eared a couple of sections. There's a really beautiful section here about stepping stones to deity. I think this book does a good job of giving you like a lot of information and giving you a lot of techniques. Like, you're not just like, it's not just an info dump. There's a lot of really great pieces of information here that you can jump off of, but then also ideas, techniques, suggestions, practices you can try, many of which don't require anything but you and your body, like how you can blow off charge if you're feeling really intense about something and all that kind of thing. It was very, very good. So lastly, let's of course talk about the Self-Worth Path, which is my book. Yay! I can't believe we're this far along in this series where we're actually into accountability at all. In the Self-Worth Path, when we get to this point, we're looking at 3 main sections: holding ourselves accountable in general, meeting our shadow, and starting to create lasting change. So really, these chapters are about, in my opinion, striking a balance between self-compassion and accountability, looking into the stuff that's lurking in the shadow. And I think it's worth pointing out, so let's just go to page 231 for a second. I think it's worth pointing out again that shadow is not always bad. And I think sometimes we think shadow's stuff is always difficult, bad stuff. And sometimes it's just stuff that we have buried, that we've hidden. And so when we get into this section in the Self-Worth Path, I actually share with you both examples and practices for how to take responsibility to really meet yourself and look at the stuff in your shadow that is difficult, the stuff that's kind of neutral, and the stuff that is good that you've hidden away because you just didn't want to bring it into the light, or something was stopping you from bringing it into the light. It is very much a gentle introduction to shadow work. There is nothing in here that is going to take you all of the way. So much of what I cover in this book is meant to be comprehensive. It's meant to introduce you to a whole lot of ideas and give you a lot of practices you can do, work that you can do. I've heard from quite a few people now that, because in every single chapter we have journal prompts that come up, points to ponder or journal about, and these make great tarot spreads as well. So in every section you'll find some of those points to ponder that you can then take and either do the journaling exercises as they're recommended, or possibly use them as prompts for tarot or oracle spreads for yourself. And that can be a really great way to engage with this content. But it is meant to basically hold you by the hand and take you on a journey that introduces you to yourself. So that's essentially what's covered in here. And again, the accountability section is really just meant to introduce you to the concept of starting some very gentle, very cautious look or work in the shadow, and into holding yourself accountable and taking responsibility for your life and for your actions and for the state of your relationships and all that good stuff. And it's important to point out that when we're doing accountability work, we remember to only own what is truly ours to own. And I just want to kind of end on that note. It's really easy for some of us, I think, to hold ourselves responsible for everything. And that's not entirely fair, right? You're not responsible for everything, but you are responsible to your reactions to things. You're responsible for the choices that you make and the ways that you engage with others. That's the kind of work we're talking about when we're talking about accountability. It's about owning your stuff and also not taking on what doesn't belong to you. Remember, you can only do what you can do. So that, my friends, those were my favorite decks and books for shadow work, for accountability work. I can't wait to hear down below what you think might make good books or decks for this kind of work. Your input always appreciated and welcome. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. All of the relevant links are down below, ways that you can support the channel, a link to buy my book if you would like to check that out, and a whole bunch of other interesting resources, links to the things that I showed here today, and all of that good stuff. Please do be sure and like this video before you head out for the day. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new here for more content on tarot, witchy things, and self-worth. Thank you so much, and may your magic always shine from the inside out. Bye, guys.